Team 17 has released the Hell Let Loose Vietnam trailer, which is set to release in 2026, and I think we should give them a round of applause for creating a trailer that was high quality and has a lot of tactical shooter enjoyers such as you and I hyped. We're gonna have a look at the trailer, all the publicly available information, express some concerns and things I'm excited for. It's great though that they made the decision to build this game from the ground up and set it in the Vietnam era when they could have done the Cold War, World War I, which honestly is kind of a cursed era for longevity, or they could have announced the Pacific for the base game. But let's look at the gameplay portion of the trailer first, since it's so rapid fire you definitely would have missed something. So right here we can see a Huey and a PT boat driving along the river, and I don't think we've seen the inclusion of boats since Bad Company 2 Vietnam, and it is confirmed they will be drivable in the game. I'm also going to be pointing out a lot of the weapons we see, and here we have the classic Type 56, and from an image on the Steam page it does have a pig poker attached to it, and I hope this is a toggleable thing. And just a quick little thought, I know implementing destruction physics, especially in Unreal Engine 5, would just kill a lot of people's PCs, but having micro destruction, like being able to blow up a bridge like this for example, to make it harder to cross a river, might actually be not that bad of an idea to kind of play into the fact the North were known for going behind enemy lines and causing sabotage. In the next scene we can see a Huey flying low, and quite frankly it's asking to be obliterated by an RPG, as well as various anti-aircraft systems that is confirmed by the devs in the Q&A video. We can see some huts off to the side, and I hope this game does implement good bullet penetration physics so cowering inside a structure doesn't give you a safe haven. We can see the player using an M16A1 and a guy wearing a boonie hat. Of course there's going to be paid cosmetics. I mean, you don't really need confirmation to kind of come to that conclusion, but I just hope they're not over the top with them. In this bit, the jungle just looks gorgeous. If you have vision problems, God bless you, but that has raised some concerns that bushwalking is going to be an even greater problem, since playing base Hell Let Loose already has you getting shot left, right, and center from areas you just can't even see. We see an M60 firing off with some nice muzzle smoke that really does stand out against the jungle, and I feel like it can make it a little easier to spot out where someone is firing from. Here we get an idea of what the suppression is like, and it's pretty intense. There's an M79 grenade launcher, and I do hope they give it various ammo types since it has a pretty big range from explosive, smoke, buckshot, flechette, however you pronounce that, and even illumination rounds, which would be very handy since this game is going to have a variation in time and weather. The next scene we see an M48 Patton, and my question is how they'll implement the tank crewman role. Would it still be 3 crew members, driver, gunner, spotter? Would the spotter get to use the mini turret? And I also find the 3 crewmen setup, while nowhere near realistic, is just better for gameplay because everyone has an active role rather than Squad 44 where a guy usually is just sitting on the machine gun port. And as someone who primarily only plays as the tank commander, it's just easier to coordinate and manage everyone. And if you look closely, you see a guy holding an M16A1 with a 30-round magazine that also didn't enter service until the 1970s. Now, this frame is interesting. First off, we have an RPG-2, and I didn't see an RPG-7 at all anywhere through the images and the video, and I believe this is the Type 74 flamethrower off to the side. That's most of the juice, especially in relation to the gameplay footage, but just a couple of extra things from earlier on. Mortars are real and gonna be their own squad role. I kinda hope they go away with the artillery system in Spawn, because playing Recon and Hell Let Loose is just boring because of it, since you just go right up to the main base, camp the artillery, rinse and repeat. But if they have mortar squads that actually require you to go all over the map to find and neutralize them, I think that will be so much better because you could actually feel like you're a special forces unit scouting the entire map for them. There's also an M16 with an M203 underbarrel. I always thought this was reserved for movies and special forces, but I'm not opposed to the grenadier type role getting access to this, as well as the M72. But now that we've had a look at the trailer, let's see what else is on the table, and the game will continue the 50 v50 server size on 6 large-scale maps at release. The game is being built from the ground up in Unreal Engine 5, and they've stated they have a separate dev team working on this, so Hell Let Loose is not going to be forgotten and abandoned. In a lot of the footage, we can see it taking place near rivers, since those 6 maps are designed with that in mind, and thankfully they will be implementing a swimming mechanic, so if you get ambushed, it isn't an immediate death sentence. The question with the boats is, will it be fixed positions, or are you able to move around and use your primary weapons to protect yourself? And also, if someone gets shot and goes down in the boat, are you able to revive them on the boat, or do they just end up in the water and drown? Now, Squad 44 and Hell Let Loose from memory are very accurate in terms of map design, to the point where people go for a walk in their neighborhood and are like, oh yeah, this is from the Hell Let Loose map, it's a one-to-one recreation. Unfortunately in this, they aren't going to be one-to-one creations, and they're going to be grounded and primarily based on real operations, but I do hope all the maps aren't just jungles and they expand into concrete jungles, which will definitely have a different dynamic compared to having an open area to run around and flank, but instead you'll have to navigate a complex city network. Now, we will be only getting 2 factions to start off with, and this is one of my concerns. We have the North Vietnamese Army, and for simplicity I'll just call them the North Viets, and the US Armed Forces. Marines or US Army, I imagine they just merged them. One of my initial concerns though was, in Hell Let Loose it's pretty symmetrical, but the devs did say they will portray that David vs Goliath asymmetry between the North and South, and I'll expand later on, but with the factions, the South has so many pickings, such as the South Koreans, Thai, Anzac, South Vietnam, they can split the US Army and Marines, but the North, they don't have that many distinct factions. You have the organized PAVN and the disorganized NFL, who had older and captured equipment. There's also the Pathet Lao and Khmer Rouge, but there isn't too much of a difference equipment-wise, and I feel like it'll be another situation like base Hell Let Loose, where you have a bunch of ally factions, some that hardly see the light of day, and only the Germans for the Axis, which, while being incredibly strong and a pretty fun faction, it does get boring. Like, a lot of us are still hoping that the Italians, or, you know, a bit of a stretch, the Japanese, get implemented, because it just breaks the monotony of playing the Axis and only having the German faction. And while all these 3 factions have unique equipment and stuff, the Pathet Lao, Khmer Rouge, they all have the same equipment that the North Viets have, but my diplomatic statement is I hope they get creative with the factions, because they have a lot to pick from. My on-the-nose statement is I just want the Anzacs in the game. Now, I've dedicated a separate section to one of the biggest gameplay mechanics that has been announced, which is the tunnel system, and based on the Steam page and the developer interviews, I've definitely been left with a lot of questions since they were pretty vague. They say there will be a tunnel network that can be set up to allow rapid deployment, acting as a spawn system. Some people think this is an actual underground thing that you can move around from point to point, but that left me thinking, what if a teammate blocks the tunnel and you have to team kill them? My theory is that there will be a pre-made tunnel system, and a commander is able to click on exit points of the tunnel that act as a spawn point, since it's stated you can deploy there in silence, which means it's not a structure like a garrison or OP, but rather like, I can use RS2 as an example. You dig the tunnel, it's got the ladder and the exit, you've built that, you can't really tell that it's there unless you walk up to it. So that's kind of what I imagine it'll be like, except rather than being like a, you know, an asset, you can actually go inside it. Now the question is, you know, could it be destroyed by a US, sort of like in a whack-a-mole system where they have to try and contain the North Viet spawns? But on the Steam page, it says you can build tunnels, and honestly at first, and many other people thought this, it was like a terraforming system where you could actually dig underground, but I highly doubt they do something like that. And I mean, it seems cool at first, but I don't really think anyone's gonna want to be there digging trenches all game, because no one likes to do it in squad where they're on build duty, so I don't think actually doing it in Hell Let Loose, it will not get done. So to conclude, my understanding is that it will be a pre-made tunnel, and people can dig or build an exit node that acts like an actual network. But honestly, I'd just love to hear your thoughts on how this system might work. But we have to talk about vehicles, which is another area they can go absolutely crazy with, since there's so many iconic and weird ones. weapons, I imagine based on the footage, the US will get the M48 Patton as their heavy or MBT equivalent, and the North will get the T-54-55. If they implement tank classes, they can add in the Shafi for recon, Bulldog for lights, throw in the Sheridan because why the hell not? The North could also get the Type 59, which still isn't that different to the T-55-54, and also the T-34-85, and you also have the PT-76, which would fit into the river theme since it is amphibious. Yet again, driving down the river in a boat and seeing this thing poke its head out the water like it's a hippo probably wouldn't be too fair for the PT boat, which would be the Gazelle in this situation. There will be helicopters that only the US will get to use, which I assume is the iconic Huey for troop and supply runs. And based on the dev Q&A, this is the complete opposite to the North Viet tunnel system. Now, they did confirm there will be various types of anti-aircraft abilities. Now, whether this is a commander call-in that, like, you know, kind of like RS2, which is very effective, or if it's just the RPGs, or it's an actual anti-aircraft gun emplacement, ultimately, I just hope they make the flight mechanics accessible, meaning I don't want like a PhD in flying mechanics to be able to, you know, actually be decent at it. I don't want it to be like Battlefield where it's easy, but I also kind of don't want it like Squad's flight mechanics. I just don't like those. Armor's non-simulated flight controls as well as RS2, in my opinion, are just, quite frankly, the best helicopter mechanics in any game that I've played, simply because it's not easy. You can't just hop in and get the hang of it. It takes practice, but it's also very forgiving and very fun as well, to the point where, you know, it just doesn't feel like a drag flying them. But the game will feature 6 different types of game modes, 2 of them being familiar like Warfare, which is the tug-of-war style game, and Offensive, which is more in line with territories or invasion game modes that you might be familiar with. 4 have not been announced, but me and others are hoping for a search and destroy game mode that requires finding something like a supply cache and needing to blow it up. Once again, I'm regurgitating the Insurgency game mode from Project Reality, but it would also be a good fit for this. There will be 19 different roles. A lot of them are familiar, such as your command roles, tank roles, basic infantry. There will be a dedicated mortar squad, and of course, there's going to be a medic role, but this kind of leads on to another concern that I have. They advertise that there's going to be a dragging mechanic, but like in Squad, Project Reality, you know, games that like that have it makes sense. But in Hell Let Loose, if they continue with the same resource-based system for tickets, it's just going to be a stupid mechanic, or just kind of a waste in my opinion, because for starters, I've said the medics hardly get used. No one waits for a medic so you can be revived. So right off the bat, I just don't think this mechanic is going to get used, but unless there's like some cultural shift or major gameplay overhaul to the ticket system, then it might get more used, but I don't know, that's just my speculation. But the last thing I'll bring up is that based on the trailer, it's going to be very good graphically with thick bushes and a dense, luscious jungle, but I have complimented some older Vietnam shooters that mimic this because it does express the jungle warfare aspect better, especially compared to RS2. This also means you'll be able to hide spawn points and supplies much better, but of course, as we've seen with Squad, going to Unreal Engine 5, it will leave some of you in the dust, unfortunately, because the reality of gaming is that it is entering a new phase that requires more of an investment, as shit as that sounds. But one hopeful thing is that since the game is being remade entirely from scratch, and also the fact that it will work on consoles, is that hopefully it'll look good, but it will also be optimized well. At least that's kind of what everyone's hoping for. Whereas Squad is getting an already fucking just a mess of code from what I've heard, and if you've seen as of this date what's happening in the server browser, and trying to get that to Unreal Engine 5, it's not going too well optimization wise, and nor is it doing the ready or not approach where it gets something that's great graphically and runs borderline fine and then absolutely just shits on the graphics so it runs on consoles. This is just going to be designed from the get-go, I imagine the same way the Arma Reforger is, where it can run on both consoles and PCs and it'll still look fucking great graphically. That's what I'm hoping for, but if you're still rocking a 1660 I think it's time you gotta start thinking about upgrading, unfortunately. But to conclude everything I've said, I was getting ready for work when I saw this trailer, and I actually went into work with a smile on my face for once in my life. It's fantastic they chose the Vietnam theater and are implementing new mechanics, vehicles, roles, because quite frankly, this feels like the Burning Lands Vietnam that we never got. And if any of the devs are watching this, you know, I hope you aren't being harassed or abused by your boss. And me and many others are eagerly awaiting for this, because it's about damn time we have a decent Vietnam shooter that is made by, you know, a decent company. But that concludes today's video. Please click on the video that is on screen because I know you'll enjoy it. My name is Tan2 and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.